Well, the other supplement that I wanted to talk about is, just from personal experience, probably just as much discussed as creatine, but might be on the opposite end of the spectrum. Maybe we'll get to that, of its efficacy to creatine, and that's branched chain amino acids. Which, am I correct? Did you also write this article recently in?
I have written about BCAAs. I've done a video on BCAAs in mass, and I can't remember when I did. I think I wrote an article on BCAAs just at the end of last year, so like
Yeah,
December.
so that's the art. That's the issue that I was looking at then. So branched chain amino acids, what are they? Because everybody sells them. I mean, there are way more branched chain amino acid brands out there than there are creatine brands, I'd say. But that's an empirical question and doesn't matter that much. But what are they, and how efficacious are or aren't they?
Yeah, good question. So the branched chain amino acids are called branched chain specifically because of their chemical structure. So when you look at, like, if you go back to high school chemistry, when you draw, chemical structures, they have kind of like a branched arm, and they're described that way. So they have a similarly structured chemical side chain. And the three amino acids that have that structure are leucine, isoleucine, and valine. And these are three of the essential amino acids. Your listeners, if they're interested in lifting, may have heard of leucine, which is often seen as the kind of the anabolic trigger that initiates muscle protein synthesis. And isoleucine and valine are other essential amino acids. So branched chain amino acids have gotten a little more. They've believed to be the rationale for why they might be a successful ergogenic supplement is for two reasons. One, they are essential amino acids. And the term essential in nutrition just means they must be supplied by the diet, meaning we can't produce them inside of us. We in sufficient quantities, at least. We need to get them from our diet. So that's one kind of, tick in the corner of, hey, this might be useful to supplement with. The next one is that, one of the branched chain amino acids is leucine, which has a specific and largest effect and kind of triggering effect on initiating muscle protein synthesis. You can't hit the highest values of muscle protein synthesis or really turn it on if you remove leucine from an essential amino acid blend, right? And then the final piece is that they're metabolized a little different than not all amino acids, but many amino acids. So they're specifically oxidized in muscle rather than having to go through the liver. So they are a faster, quote unquote, fuel. So they might potentially contribute meaningfully to metabolism, muscle metabolism while training. And we do see that BCAA oxidation rates increase with exercise. So for those like three reasons, people have been like, hey, BCAAs, this might be a good thing. Muscle protein synthesis, something we don't get in our diet unless, very easily. And, it might actually help us perform acutely better. So yeah. And interestingly enough, it's even more confusing if you were to dig into the literature. Like if you were to look at some of the meta-analyses on BCAAs, either looking at acute increases in performance or even reductions in soreness or muscle damage, the meta-analyses say, hey, BCAAs are better than placebo. But I think that's a really important distinction, that they're being compared to placebo, right? So protein contains amino acids. So if you eat a chicken breast, if you have some whey, if you have some milk, if you have a vegan protein, you're getting a pretty large dosage of BCAAs, right? And so the kind of the barrier we have to clear is not just that there's a mechanistic rationale. There's a mechanistic rationale for a ton of things, like vitamin C, but the data on vitamin C is not great, because guess what? All the things that are in dietary supplements are in the food supply. So if you have a balanced diet, is supplementing your diet, which is the question we need to ask, benefiting you? And if you have a sufficient protein intake, which we already talked about, the question is, do BCAAs benefit you? So sure, if you supplement people with BCAAs and you compare it to nothing, sometimes they do better, not always. And in fact, if you look at the research where the individuals in the study were already consuming a sufficiently high protein intake, that's when you don't see a benefit of BCAAs. So the review in Mass, which you were specifically referring to, is of a really good systematic review by, I think, Martino and colleagues, that came out in 2022, and it's titled "Oral Branch Chain Amino Acid Supplementation in Athletes: A Systematic Review." And their conclusion was that there's no evidence that BCAAs enhance athletic performance, but they may enhance recovery. However, when assessing studies in which protein isn't matched or controlled, there are no studies that I'm aware of still to date that show an advantage of taking BCAAs. So when a high protein diet is consumed, you're already getting sufficient BCAAs. And when they actually do a comparison of, say, BCAAs to whey or essential amino acids, either acutely looking at mechanistic things like increases in muscle protein synthesis, or looking at actual outcomes, you either see an equivalence or a superiority of whole protein or the entire complement of 8 essential amino acids. And you can get higher muscle protein synthesis rates with having the whole complement of essential amino acids. So BCAAs this isn't their heyday right now. We're actually on the downswing. If you were to be around, say, 2005 in the lifting community, and we actually have surveys from that time period, so like 2005 to like 2013, 12, somewhere in there, that's when BCAAs were crushing it in terms of sales, and the marketing was huge. And if you talk to a bodybuilder, that's one of their supplements they absolutely had. They got this big ass jug of either green or pink liquid, which is basically a gallon of water mixed with like 50 grams of BCAAs that they sip throughout the day, right? And it's their anti-catabolic juice, and then that's what, if you surveyed bodybuilders, they believed, hey, this is preventing muscle loss. There was something like 60 to 70% of all bodybuilders were supplementing with BCAAs. Now, if you look at studies or surveys in the modern era, that's dropped down to like 30%. So the hype has started to fall away. The research has not backed up the claims when you look at it from a more well-controlled perspective of controlling for protein. There was more people taking BCAAs in 2012 than there were creatine, which is wild when you think about it. It shows how much hype and marketing can influence people. But now those rates are a little more reasonable. We see BCAA has fallen substantially, but there's still that, I can't remember whose law it is, but the amount of effort it takes to dispel a myth versus to generate it is an order of magnitude higher. 100% true in the bodybuilding community. So there's people who got exposed to enough to convince them 15 years ago, and they're going to be taking BCAAs until they, croak. So is what it is. But yeah, the data really doesn't back it up. You're getting plenty of BCAAs if you just consume a high protein diet.